All right, welcome back to another episode of the Aspiring VC. Your host, Matt Snow with Mass Ventures here. I have the pleasure of talking to Rishub Nahar today, a venture partner at Contrary and a venture fellow at Kleiner Perkins. But before we talk anything business, let's talk coffee. Dunkin' or Starbucks? What's your pick, man?
Oh, that's a good one. I usually am in New York, and so there's Starbucks everywhere, but I think I'll actually have to go with Dunkin' for this one.
Nice, nice, good choice. I am, Boston. We're a lot of Dunkin' people over here, so
Oh yeah, definitely for sure. I'm a
definitely
big
prefer.
Celtics fan, so yeah, part of that runs in.
Great, great. Well, let's just do a quick summary. Tell the listeners who you are and what are these firms that you're working with and what are your roles with them.
Yeah, sure, sounds good. And Matt, thanks again so much for having me on the show. Yeah, so my name is Rishub. I'm right now a senior at NYU, study computer science and statistics. And a lot of my background in college was doing like engineering at various startups in New York and SF. Um, Last year, I got the chance to get introduced to one of the Kleiner Perkins companies called Modern Health. Incredible company dealing with mental health services. It's like the fastest founded female unicorn. Um, and then going forward, like after college, I'll actually be working as a PM for another KP company called Pathlight. So that'll be my first gig out of college. So definitely excited about that. And my work with Contrary. So Contrary is a venture fund that backs like top early career talent, both university students as well as recent alum and even faculty. And Contrary really focuses on being like the first investor at either pre-seed or seed round. Typically invests between 50K and $500,000 check sizes, industry agnostic, everything from enterprise SaaS to direct to consumer. And yeah, it's been an incredible time. My work as a venture partner with Contrary has really been sourcing startups from the NYU and NYC ecosystem. And yeah, I've really enjoyed both experiences and happy to chat more about it.
Totally. I think, I was really interested in your background. You've done stuff even with NEA and 8VC before the current roles. You've worked with a ton of amazing companies, including Palantir and Modern Health. And I think it would just be great to kind of dive like all the way back to like maybe the end of high school, the story of kind of how your interests formed both on the engineering and the investing side and technology. And like, how did you kind of fall into all of these roles?
Yeah, sure. That sounds great. Yeah, so it's interesting. Towards the end of high school, like in high school, my favorite subject was econ. Um, and so I kind of thought, and I like playing the stock market game. So I was like, okay, I want to get a career on Wall Street, study finance, econ, that kind of stuff. So, going to New York made the most sense. So yeah, like first year at NYU, I was studying finance, and took a CS class or two on the side, and then did some hackathons as well. Really enjoyed that. So I was like, okay, let me try, doing a whole CS major if I can survive it. And yeah, really enjoyed it and decided that the best way to learn more would be to do like a few, software engineering gigs at a few different companies. After a while of doing that, freshman and sophomore year, realized that I did want to kind of get back more to a bit of my business roots, so to speak. So that actually led to me when I was with Palantir, I decided to be like what's called a forward deployed software engineer as opposed to a regular software engineer. And the difference is a forward deployed, you can kind of think as being a software engineer mixed with a little bit of business development and sales. So that was like an interesting kind of mix of the two. And then also got the opportunity to do a gig at NEA, which thankfully is just like a few blocks away from NYU campus. So yeah, got a chance to work there with some of their NYC analysts and doing diligence on companies, screening startups, and yeah, just kind of seeing the inner workings of a large VC firm. So yeah, kind of that mix of engineering and then starting to re-explore my business roots that led me to in my senior year deciding that okay, I want to work for a startup again, but maybe not in a pure engineering kind of path. And so when the opportunity at Pathlight presented itself, it seemed like a really compelling company that has a lot of growth potential. And there were some really interesting product challenges to solve. So yeah, that's kind of the arc of my early career.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I love the contrary model. I think, I guess another similar model is kind of the Northeastern Idea Venture Accelerator here. And I love how they kind of provide students with, real life venture experience before they've even graduated. I mean, that's kind of priceless. I thought about starting something similar at when I was in college. By the time I had the idea, I realized like I probably didn't have enough time to get the thing off the ground because I was almost already graduated. But I do love like what that offers. So maybe it'd be great to dive into a little more about. It sounded like there's kind of a big check size range. It could be as small as 50, or I think you said as much as 500,000. So
Mhm.
it'd be cool to understand like how Contrary operates, and for you specifically, it sounds like you've done a lot of sourcing, and maybe you've even, whether it was a deal you sourced or someone else, you probably worked on some of the diligence and closing aspects of those deals too. So it'd be great to learn about what that was like for you so far.
Yeah, for sure. So the way the general contrary deal flow model works is we have venture partners at every one of the major like research universities in North America. So for example, I'm one of the venture partners at NYU. And kind of the role of the venture partner is to A, source startups from their university or their city's ecosystem, and then also B, just support founders at that university in any way they can, whether it's connecting them to other university resources, connecting them with other experts in their network, and then also just holding events for founders and entrepreneurs. So it's both that like sourcing and that support aspect to being a venture partner. And then, once you find a specific company in your university and, you do a meeting or two with them and you think, hey, these might be a compelling fit for Contrary, we'll typically escalate it up to what's called a partnership meeting. And that's kind of where the founder will come on a Zoom conference and every venture partner from like all the universities will hop on this, right? So it'll be a big call with like up to 50 or so partners at once. And yeah, they'll just kind of give their pitch and then, have like a Q&A session. And that's kind of where the foundation as a whole, like Contrary as a whole, gets like a general idea about this company. After that, we'll do like typically a round or two more of diligence and then decide to make the call. So we try to keep the whole thing very streamlined. So typically like from first meeting to decision won't be more than a month because we really want to respect the founder's time as much as possible.
That's awesome. And then, for some of the people listening who are really interested in kind of working in the industry, but maybe haven't been on the inside seeing like a diligence process, do you want to explain like, what type of write-ups you guys are doing and what type of questions you're asking in between? Obviously they come in first to you, you're deciding whether or not it even makes sense to bring it to the full team. And then there's a decision on, that presentation, but afterwards kind of like the remaining things to evaluate in the company before kind of a go, no go decision on the investment.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the one underlying factor that's most important at every stage of our diligence process is assessing the quality of the founding team. And this is true for any stage of investing, but especially true at the pre-seed and seed stage, because you really are making a bet on the founders. Often there isn't, a product sometimes or like a proven business model. You're really just taking the bet, hey, is this a compelling space and is this the team that can execute on it? So I think at every stage we're looking, can the founder A, tell a very compelling story, and B, can they make everyone very excited about it? And that's super important because their ability to do that will dictate their ability to both raise future venture capital and also to attract top talent. So being like a very compelling storyteller is absolutely paramount for us. And then, as with any VC firm, the size of the market is super important. So we've found some like very interesting ideas, but that are just a little too niche for us to be venture scalable. So I'd say like at every stage, the most important factors are both assessing the quality of the team and then also assessing the total market size.
Yeah, it's really funny. We've talked about this a lot at Mass Ventures, and our president and CEO Charlie Hipwood has a podcast, Fundable Founder, where he talks with all these portfolio companies about how they actually got funding and what had to happen in the conversations. And um, to some extent, you need to know when you're evaluating the company. It's like, all right, is this the founding team that is going to be able to raise the next round? And maybe
Yeah.
that sounds messed up, but that's super important because if they can't, that you're only going to make it as a venture-backed startup if you can do the next 2 to 5 or however many rounds it's going to take to get you to an exit. And you, like you said, you need that storyteller. You need someone who's capable of selling that vision.
100%.
So it's super interesting. On the market size part, how do you think about having good numbers for the true size of markets and being able to kind of critically analyze the numbers being presented by founders in these presentations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So early in my career as an investor, I always thought about market size from like a top-down perspective, right? Like, oh, there's 100 million children in the US and 50% need this. And is this very kind of top-down perspective. And I find that way is often imprecise and often leads to like very inflated numbers. Um, the better way that I like to think about this is more from a bottoms up perspective, right? So you think about, okay, what are the unit economics of every single individual customer that you can sell to? What is the total number of customers that you can sell to? And then like, what is the percentage penetration that you would need to achieve like, venture scalable returns? So really think about it from that unit economic perspective, I found to be particularly helpful. And kind of on a side note to this, I think this is really important, especially when you're looking at a lot of new SaaS monetization models. The reason I say this is because, I think we're entering the stage where enterprise SaaS is no longer just charging this flat rate, and that's the only way that they're monetizing. A lot of times now you see that they're monetizing off of payments. They're monetizing like at a much more granular per usage, like number of API calls. So it's super important that you understand that like how much of value you can extract from each user, especially when there's these different monetization models at play, and then kind of build up from that. So that's typically how I've thought about market sizing, especially in more recent times.
So like a founder, like I'm just really interested in this because I think about it a lot too now about how can I have a better, mental model on general market critique and market sizing. Like if someone comes at you and they're pitching, like a $10 billion TAM, which is, brought down from like a 50 billion overall market or whatever, are you like going to take that and say, okay, I'm going to automatically assume it's at least lower than 5 billion? Or like, are you going to like, maybe make your own numbers on your own time thinking about, this market size based off what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'll probably think about my own numbers. And like I totally understand what you're saying. Like I can't tell you the number of times I've seen on a pitch deck, like the slide which will have those concentric circles. You know what I'm talking about? And
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, I understand why people do it. But yeah, to be honest, I don't put too much weight on those slides personally. It can offer good context, but yeah, I'll typically think about it on my own and try to do kind of what I said before about thinking about it from the bottoms up.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And, going back to kind of your origin story, um, what do you think are the things that have worked best for you on finding your passion and your niche, and also like networking? And you've secured a lot of great jobs and roles and internships, and so I think a lot of people wanting to enter into this industry, it's not always clear how to go about the networking and how you actually secure some of these opportunities. So like what has worked for you?
Yeah, 100%. So I'd say the golden rule absolutely is cold emailing. So I've gotten two jobs, both my job at Modern Health and then the previous job I did at a startup called Neighborly, by just cold emailing folks there. Um, like a good cold email, I think people are often worried that, oh, I don't go to a Target school, or oh, I don't have McKinsey on my resume. No one's going to pick me up if I apply. That's not true. If you cold email the person at the company and say, hey, I'm so and so, I'm really interested in what you're doing. And if you really want to go above and beyond, you make a write up that says, like, hey, this is some of my thoughts about your product, how you can improve it, right? That just goes so much more than just having like a McKinsey or a Princeton on your resume, in my belief. And that's a great way to get a phone call to start the interview process. So I'd say the number one thing is to do cold emailing.
Yeah, and it's so true. I think I saw this tweet the other day that was like startups, they don't rocket ship growing startups, they don't have the opportunity to have someone who's just sitting on for the ride. They need someone who's going to be like, either this kind of like insane seller or this insane kind of producer of internal, strategy and new products. And so if you can show that from the gate, they don't really care where you come from. That's much more important.
100%, right? They're not looking for like, the summertime soldier, right? They want someone who's in it for the long haul, both through the good and bad times.
Totally. So, I feel like it's kind of clear, but what it seems like, this venture capital and startup world and investing world as well is probably going to keep you for a long time. So what is it about this space that drew you in initially, and what do you think is going to keep you, unless I'm wrong, it seems like you'll be in this space for quite a while. So what kind of pulls you to that?
Yeah, I think overall, I just realized that after working for some larger companies, medium-sized companies, and smaller companies, I just thought that at least at this stage in my career, I learned the most with smaller teams, and I find myself more driven in those kinds of environments. So just like from a personal career growth perspective, I realized like that's probably the best way to optimize the start of my career by working with early startups. And in terms of like venture capital, I just find it super interesting because like I wanted to I like to explore different industries anyways, and like at NYU I would go to all the pitch competitions anyways, so having the tagline as an investor is just kind of an excuse to do that even more, and founders are even more willing to talk to you if you say there's potential investment on the line. So yeah, I just find it as a great like way to explore different industries. I'm trying to think if there's like a more profound answer I can give. um yeah, I would say that also as an investor, like you think of, you make these mental models and about how to evaluate companies and these investment theses about where different industries are going, and that helps you understand where to deploy capital. But it's actually those same theses and frameworks that you can use to figure out where you want to deploy your labor, figuring out where you want to work, and arguably your labor is even more important than your capital or the most valuable form of capital that you have. So I found that that VC side has really helped, interestingly, in helping me decide where I want to work. And actually, one of the mental models, investment theses that I was working on when I was at Palantir helped me guide my decision to work at Pathlight.
Wow, it is a great point that you bring up, because I think we live in a very kind of money centric society, but people don't realize that actually the scarcest resource in like basically all the universe is our time, right? And
Yeah,
so,
100%.
yeah, using, we probably under allocate strategic thinking on where we're using our time, and where to improve on it. And so applying that mindset to the labor thought is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And, so what you just mentioned that, that kind of strategic thinking at Palantir brought you to, you said Modern Health, right? So what was the kind of process or project that you were working on that kind of helped that thesis form?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it actually kind of helped direct me to Pathlight. But the thesis was, I was looking at Palantir and I was like, wow, it's a 40, $50 billion company. And I was trying to understand like, okay, what was the secret sauce to its success, right? Palantir likes to have a bit of like a cloak and dagger mystic around it. But at the core, what Palantir is doing is, it really is a data management company in the sense that, hey, they break down the data silos, they pipe it all into a centralized data lake, whether that be Palantir Foundry or Palantir Gotham. And then now with all the data in one place, they layer useful applications on top of it. And in Palantir's case, those applications are meant for the verticals of government, defense, and industrials, right? So everything from counterterrorism to optimization of supply chains is what those applications on top do. And I was like, okay, this is a pretty interesting formula. And when I started to look at it, I saw other companies also start to use this formula. If you look at a company like Segment, right? Again, taking the different data silos and then piping it into a unified customer profile, and then using that to serve other applications. So I started to think, okay, what other verticals could this be applied for? This kind of formula, and I saw it being applied to healthcare with interesting companies like Particle Health, which is I think actually founded by some ex-Palantir folks. And then Pathlight, which is essentially doing it for performance data of customer-facing teams. So the thesis behind Pathlight is, look, your customer-facing teams, your sales teams, your customer service teams are using just this absolute plethora of software that are generating all this data. Your Salesforce, your Zendesk, your Twilio, and on and on and on, right? But all this data lives in very disparate systems. So we pipe it into a data lake and then put applications on top that make it very easy for customer-facing teams to understand, A, how they're doing, and also B, how to get coached by their managers. So it really is, it's really interesting to see this kind of formula, but the so-called data lake being applied to very different verticals and having, big outcomes. So yeah, that's kind of the way I took this nebulous thoughts I was getting at Palantir and then just saw empirical examples to help prove it.
Yeah, I really love that. And I know, I guess I'm starting to think I need to do a better job of tracking these Palantir Mafia folks that are going off and seeing what they're starting right now, and like starting to track that,
100%. It's interesting. When I was interviewing at startups, there were a couple companies that like the Palantir Mafia there was strong, where like they were either founded by Palantir folk or there was just a bunch of Palantir people there. I think it's interesting. It's kind of like the way like you would say like a Bain or a McKinsey Mafia. I think it's just like with these companies that do a lot of like consulting work, it's just naturally, people serve in the trenches with each other. They just form this camaraderie. They know just how high caliber people are, so they naturally attract each other when they go off to form new companies. And I think that's really interesting. So that's arguably the best part of working at Palantir, getting to claim, even if it's just as an intern, just claiming that you get to be part of that mafia one day,
Oh,
hopefully.
and like going forward, you've been with NEA and 8VC and Kleiner and Contrary and Palantir and all these groups. Like, are you going to use that and like, let's say you find some new person who joins NEA or some person who left Palantir to start their company. Like, do you feel comfortable reaching out to these people and be like, hey, I spent time at the firm, before, like, would you be willing to connect? And maybe you've already been doing a lot of this too.
Yeah, 100%. Especially like with Palantir, I've definitely done that. So like again, like when I was trying to get interviews at these startups, I would cold email and say, hey, I spent time at Palantir working on these projects. And again, that camaraderie is often there, so that's enough to like warrant a call. It's kind of like that. Like I think there's that insider, like if you meet an ex-Bain person, if you're from Bain, they'll buy you a drink. I guess it's like with Palantir, like they'll ask you to join your company. So I might be exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, I found that. And then yeah, definitely in terms of other companies, with Modern Health, I don't know if the mafia there has formed yet. I think everyone there is staying there because they're doing really well. But yeah, I think that's definitely something I'd advise people to do, is like, keep track of those old companies you worked for and see where people are going. That's like a great way to make connections to networks you otherwise wouldn't have had the chance to kind of get into.
Totally. And earlier when you talked about, having the investor title, it kind of breaks down barriers. It makes people being even more willing to talk to you. I feel like to anyone that like is trying to get into this space more, I feel like the easiest thing they can do is find an organization that will let them be like a tech or venture scout, right? Because there's a lot of these different programs out there. And I feel like that's a great way to, it's like, again, it's like once you have these, excuses to talk to people, people will be more willing, right? So it's just finding out like that unwritten hack of just finding it, making yourself compelling for why people should spend their time with you,
Yeah, 100%. So, subtle plug, but yeah, definitely apply for Contrary when we're looking for new venture partners at your university. So that's a great program. I know there are other venture scout programs out there. But even if you can't be part of a venture scout program for whatever reason, my biggest advice is do the job even before you have the job. Right. So what that means is like, just cold email a VC firm and be like, hey, I'm really interested in this space. I'm happy to source companies to you for free because I'm just interested. And that's a great way to establish a relationship with a VC firm. And yeah, it's an absolute grind, right? You're just searching through lists, but the biggest value you have as an undergrad or as a young career professional is your time. That's the biggest value add that you can give to VCs because they are always crunched for it. So use that time and just do the job, even if it's for free, and just source them companies. Maybe that VC firm won't offer you a job right out, but that's a great way to kind of get plugged in and, more importantly, to build a network with VCs. So I think it's absolutely possible for anyone from any university, even if you're not part of a formal like scout or venture partner program.
Yeah, totally. And that doesn't stop when you join either. I mean, I'll spend my time on the weekends going through Crunchbase and finding what I can, DMing founders, and then trying to link them to other people that I think are a fit or pull them into our own network. And that's just like you said, it's like you just do it and then you kind of become it. You sort of manifest it in a way.
Yeah, 100%.
I do want to ask before we go into like this rapid fire stuff, you have a really interesting set of experiences, really interesting kind of description of how you view companies and markets and how you think about things. What is the impact that you want to have in this world? And, what do you want to, what are some of the issues you'd like to see more startups tackling? And then what do you kind of want the direct result of your work to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say long term, I've always been, I've spent a lot of my time in these last couple of years in either New York or SF, right? The classic like economic meccas of this country. But I'm actually originally from like a small town in Maryland, and I'm interested in figuring out ways to kind of proliferate, right? Take these lessons of like what builds such great tech ecosystems and find a way to kind of proliferate them around the country. there's a lot of challenges with that. And to some extent, you can't overcome the network effects in New York or SF. But I think there's ways that you can take advantage of like local talent, cheaper rents to build tech ecosystems that maybe aren't as big, but that do inject talent in that area. And I think that's so important because, right, workers in New York and SF are so productive because of their networks there. And I worry that other places in the country, these learnings of best industry practices aren't being spread out. So I think if we can kind of create more centers of commerce and innovation, I think that's a great way to kind of fight the widening wealth inequality between coast and the heartland. So like that's definitely something that I care about. And then in terms of like problems that like I'd like to tackle or that I'd like to see startups tackle, I guess like in general, I think like going forward, and this is already done a lot, I think developer tooling is probably something that we need to spend a lot more time in, just because there will always be a crunch on engineers. And the biggest bottleneck right now to creating more interesting software applications is engineering talent. So we need to create more ways for even people who are not engineers, right, to be able to contribute. One problem that I've found a lot in the companies I've worked with is that engineers have a lot of great tooling. Obviously, there's still work that needs to be done, right? But like if I'm an engineer, I can use Postman, GitHub, SourceGraph. But if I'm a non-engineer, right, I'm stuck using the same tools that I was, 10, 15 years ago, PowerPoint, Excel, all the same things. And that means that the disparity between productivity between engineers and non-engineers has only grown. And I worry about that. So I'm really interested in creating like the next generation of tooling that can make even non-engineers more, kind of give them superpowers. And that was also part of the reason why I decided to join Pathlight, to give like, non-engineers, customer-facing teams these superpowers. So I know that was kind of long-winded, but I think that's the biggest thing. Like I really want to figure out ways to make everyone more productive, irrespective of geography or role. So yeah, that's
I think
long.
That was great, man. I've talked to James Barley, a close friend at Revolution's Rise of the Rest Seed Fund, and Mac at Rare Breed Ventures. Love both those guys, and I think they're kind of right along with your mission. Some kind of tie into the Maryland roots there, and I think we'll talk after the episode. There's a couple of companies I want you to take a look at, but I do love the thought about really driving into software to increase kind of well-being and productivity for this non-engineer world. I mean, if we're going to build crazy startups to take us outside of the earth, we're probably going to need better productivity tools for the non-engineers too, right?
100%. 100%. Is Rise of the Rest fun? Is that JD Vance's fun?
I actually, let me check, but this is all of the outside of outside of New York, Silicon Valley, and Massachusetts. But while we are,
cool.
I think Steve Case and David Hall, I believe, are two of the heads of it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But while we're looking at that, let's segue here into these quote unquote rapid fire. They don't always go super quick on the answering, but that's what they're branded as. But the first one is, who's been one of your most important mentors? The caveat I like to add is, if you remember something they said or something they did that kind of still stands in mind with you today.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll try to be rapid fire about this, and I'll give a little unorthodox answer here. I'd probably say like honestly like JFK or Obama, and like I know that's like really weird, but like I used to be like very introverted and like didn't like speaking in public, but like whenever I listened to their speeches, like I think I first listened to like the JFK moon speech in like middle school, and I just fell in love with it, and I was like, wow, this is the power of like really good like words and really good articulation. So I was like, okay, that kind of got me out of my shell, and I think that's really what catalyzed it all. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I still listen to those speeches, and they just give me a lot of strength. Yeah.
That's awesome. I actually think, to our point earlier, maybe all the founders should have to listen to some of those speeches before they start pitching and hear what it sounds like to be a great orator and what that could do for them.
100%. Yeah.
The next one I like to ask is, outside of the firms that you work directly with, what's a VC firm or a specific general partner at one of these funds that you really enjoy, and what is it about their strategy that you like?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of different VC partners that I like track their writings for pretty closely. Trying to think. I think I'll give a few here. I think David Kraft over at Red Craft Ventures has some great thoughts about enterprise SaaS. I think Angela Strange at Andreessen has some really good thoughts on fintech. I think Martin Casado at Andreessen has like really interesting thoughts on like data infrastructure and like developer tools, cloud software, just like cloud deployments and things like that. I'd say those are a couple that I listen to the most. I really like VCs who've been operators before, because like they have that perspective at every level of the stack, so to speak. And I think Matt Harris at Bain Capital Ventures is really good for fintech as well. So yeah, there's kind of like a whole smattering of them that I track.
No, that's great. That's great.
And also silent plug for like Will Robbins and Eric at Contrary. They always put out really good content.
Totally, man. When you're looking at companies, what are the characteristics that get you really excited about potentially wanting to elevate it as an investment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, honestly, if I could distill it to one thing, and this is actually what Joe Lonsdale told me when I had the chance to speak with him, general founding partner at AVC, co-founder of Palantir. He said at the end of the day, like the most important thing is that they have like a very non-contrarian truth, or sorry, a very contrarian truth, right? So something that you took as like classic for granted, and then the founder can prove to you very passionately and very articulately, here's why everyone else is wrong, right? And if they can do that very succinctly, like that gets me excited, because I'm like, okay, there's potentially massive alpha to gain from here.
Yeah, I'm right back to what we're saying about being kind of a good speaker and a good salesman. But yeah, you have to have that. You have to have that aggressive view too. For your self-education and like keeping up with the news, what are the main podcasts and blogs that you find yourself going to? And then also like are there some maybe like some impactful books you've read that have really changed your kind of world outlook?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of like things that I read, like, so I'll often follow the newsletters of these VCs that I follow. The A16C blog is really good. Stratechery is obviously very good. And I like Stratechery a lot because it's completely unbiased, right? Like the VC firms sometimes have a bias to try to support whatever they've invested in, but like with Stratechery, Ben Thompson has like, he's not getting paid by any of these companies, right? So it's really great non-biased information. In terms of books that I really recommend, yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a few books that like help people gain general knowledge in like different areas. So for example, Venture Deals is a good one just to understand the kind of the roots of venture capital and some of the mechanics of it. I think like for design, I think like The Design of Everyday Things, Don't Make Me Think. I think these are like classic books that help you with design. And then I think like Clean Code helps you with software engineering. So those helps you with those hard skills a lot. And then other than that, like I really, especially during quarantine, like I really enjoyed like starting to read more philosophy books. And I think that just gives you a better kind of world view, and it makes you more calm. So I think two that have really helped me are Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and then also the Upanishads, which is like a classic Hindu text. And like those are both really interesting, a little dense at times, but yeah, those have been great reads.
That's awesome. And I actually picked up a copy of Meditations this summer. I haven't finished it yet, but I have that. And Ryan Holiday's, I think it's Life of the Stoics.
Yeah, I haven't read his stuff yet, but I've heard it's really good.
Yeah, I've been getting very into it. I have this medallion thing they sell in the Daily Stoic store, that Memento Mori. It sounds kind of dark, but I actually think it's uplifting. Remember death. And so it's like, remember that you will not live forever. And there's like a skull in the middle. You have the hourglass on one side and rose on the other. So you have like, time is the only thing separating you from life and death, but it's more like live in the moment and value what you have.
Yeah. Damn. Wow.
I know, really, I think if I ever got a tattoo, it would be of this thing. Just really
that. That's so cool. Yeah, I know he has like another one that I think it's like the coin with like like an ember on it, and it's like I think it's like amor fati, which means like the love of fate, and that means like you don't just accept the burdens of life, you like actively embrace and love them. And I think that's like going back like something that Nietzsche would even talk about. But yeah, I think that's like a good out view of like how to view burdens. It's kind of like what Marcus Aurelius said, like what stands in the way becomes the way. right? So like that is, I think, encapsulates Stoic philosophy in one line.
Yeah, man, it's amazing stuff. I think if you once you like realize like honestly how brutally hard it is to be a founder, I think you have to like have a stoic outlook. So I don't know how else
Yeah,
you could like, I don't know how else you could get through that, because there's just so it's just insane uphill battle. It's crazy to me that like, we're empowering. It's like never been easier to start a business, but it is still this insane task.
yeah,
It doesn't really necessarily, we have a lot of better tools. It doesn't necessarily make the task any easier for this like crazy uphill battle that the founders have to face.
yeah, 100%.
So moving on, here's a question that we took from Tim Ferriss, but really enjoy is, what is a purchase of like $100 or a couple $100 that has had like an outsized impact of either utility or happiness for you?
Oh, that's a tough question.
I've had people talk about, like, a lot of people said AirPods, which is stereotypical. People have talked about exercise equipment and books, and someone talked about a high quality backpack. Like, it could literally be anything.
Yeah, I'd say cast iron skillet. It's come pretty handy in the dorm life. I'm not gonna lie. Like that thing, that'll take care of everything for you.
Wow.
It's a little high maintenance at times, but yeah, I mean that like one pot meal, like everything. So like all your cooking needs, you can put in the oven. Yeah, there's nothing it can't do. Even heat, like you gotta love it. Like the Pennsylvania Amish knew what they were doing. Like
I had someone I talked to about this question talked about having like an air fryer, I think is what it was.
oh yeah.
Which
Oh
would
yeah.
be really fun to have.
Yeah.
But
I feel like I'd still overuse it. So like it would negate the healthy purpose.
oh,
Like
totally. Just fry Oreos and whatever
yeah.
else. I definitely want you to promote yourself. So whether it's Twitter or blogs or LinkedIn or anything else, like what are the best places for people to find you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Just Rishub_Nahar on Twitter. I've recently got into the Twitter game after like a lot of apprehension because like Twitter is like the Wild West and
Oh yeah.
who yeah. But yeah, feel free to follow me there. You can check out my website, rishubnahar.com. And yeah, I often write and I usually post on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn or Twitter is probably the best.
Awesome. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. It's been super fun, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And hope to do it again in the near future.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. And also my email is just my name, rishubnahar@gmail.com if anyone wants to reach out. But yeah, really appreciate it. This has been super fun and hope you have a good one.
Likewise, we'll be in touch.
All right, sounds good. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.
Looking to innovate, invent, and disrupt? We're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.